What if those initial writers among the earliest humans weren't documenting history, but striving to stop it from happening all over again? What if the heavens they observed with such intense focus weren't a cause for awe, but a realm of dread they had endured already one time prior, under the cracked soil of southern Iraq, where the scorching summer temperatures transform the distant skyline into a fluid, wavering glow, and long-dried river channels cradle recollections older than spoken words. Shards of fired clay continue to bear alerts inscribed into the damp earth 5,000 years in the past. Every cuneiform impression was intended to safeguard something vital. However, today those alerts lie buried under ages of dust and quiet, awaiting a person to grasp what they were actually conveying. Thus, before the tale draws you in completely, pause for a second to like this video and tap subscribe. But do so only if you're attracted to accounts of the past that fade the boundary between legend and endurance. And, should you remain here, share in the comments from where you're tuning in and what the time is in your spot. I wish to envision this primordial terror extending over the globe, linking every one of us in the shadows. The narrative starts not through enlightenment, but amid bewilderment. During the late 1800s, teams from Britain and France dug into the tells close to Uruk, Lagash, and Sippar, those enormous earthen hills that scatter across the Mesopotamian plain like coffins for whole civilizations. Their tools uncovered stratum upon stratum of clay tablets, thousands in number, piled within rooms that had been shut when Rome remained a swamp and Athens lingered as a vision. These were the archives of the Sumerians, and from the instant those tablets saw translation, an eerie element surfaced within the chronology of human insight. For what the Sumerians bequeathed wasn't the tentative stargazing of a society just starting to tally the lights above. It was already polished, calibrated, and eerily exact. The oldest star lists emerged circa 3,500 BC without any trial period, no rough sketches, no step-by-step progress. Their Venus orbits hit true to the exact day. Their forecasts for eclipses could stand up to verification from today's computational tools. Their maps of constellations aligned flawlessly with the firmament as it showed in their time, and as it had shown millennia earlier. It seemed as though the veil had risen on a society that launched with its gaze locked upward, following designs that ought to have demanded ages to unravel. Yet they weren't merely observing, they were alerting. Scholars in archaeology anticipated crop counts and shrine ledgers. In their place, they unearthed tablets depicting stars that intersect, fiery rocks plummeting from above, and deities unleashing ruin from on high. Omen writings cautioned that as the crimson star ascends in the east, starvation trails behind. Star lists noted not only world positions but hazardous intervals, eras when the firmament turned into peril itself. These held no lyrical flourishes. They rested next to numerical charts, building blueprints, and water channel timetables. The wording stayed detached, factual, pressing. A single tablet pulled from the sanctuary archive at Sippar logs a progression that contemporary experts still grapple to interpret. A tally of heavenly occurrences chased by an account of the scorching gale that demands no moisture, and the moment the skyline ignited. It comes across less as fable and more as a first-hand report. The clay retains what we have let slip. Picture grasping one such tablet, its face still textured with the grit of long-ago Mesopotamian soil. Its angular incisions driven firm by a reed tool gripped in a palm that ceased its breath 5,000 years past. The script they employed, cuneiform, served not simply as letters, but as a packing of significance. Each sign bore noise, emblem, and at times several tiers of sense. Via these signs, they noted healing, rules, commerce paths, songs, and the travels of worlds most societies wouldn't label for yet another millennium. One passage lists the backward glide of Mars, another outlines Jupiter's dozen-year loop. A further one follows the route of what they termed Chatilu, the scarlet annihilator star, with exactness implying they had followed it over lineages. And beyond that lie the shrines themselves. When diggers revealed the ziggurat at Ur, they stumbled on an oddity. Its edges matched not merely the main compass points, but the ascent spots of particular star groups: Taurus, the Pleiades, Orion's belt. Further shrines aimed at the height of power locations of recognized shooting star flows. The building style held no mere emblematics. It served a purpose. These weren't spots for adoration. They stood as watchposts crafted to monitor heavenly hazards. The Sumerians recounted an era prior to urban centers, prior to monarchs, when wisdom came down from above. They portrayed their first instructors not as mortal ancestors, but as godly beings. The Apkallu, the 7 wise ones who arose once the floods withdrew and guided humankind to reconstruct. Today's experts cloak this phrasing in fable, yet the clay itself seems more ancient than simile. It seems like evidence. How might a society spring forth so abruptly, bearing such elevated comprehension? The annals favor gradual buildup, each find stacking upon the last, implements advancing bit by bit, insight handed down with care over bloodlines. But the Sumerians break that cadence. They enter the dig records fully able to read and write, fully adept at numbers, fully scrutinizing the heavens with a fervor hinting at earlier compulsion. And they stood not solitary in their recollections. As diggers aligned Sumerian deluge tales with those from Akkadian, Hebrew, Hindu, and even Mesoamerican origins, they uncovered the identical order. A globe-shattering disaster, flames descending from the skies, gloom persisting for days, floods swallowing settlements, and a scant few who lived to guard the legacy of what preceded. These held no copied yarns. They formed matching remembrances. How might societies divided by seas and ages depict the identical ruinous scheme? Maybe since the ruin was genuine, maybe since enduring demanded recall. Within the Museum of the Ancient Near East in Berlin, a clay barrel sits shielded by glass. Its exterior bears thick cuneiform, a construction homage for a shrine to Inanna, deity of the dusk star. Yet amid the ritual words, a single phrase emerges. This marks the renewal of what existed prior. Renewal, not forging, not devising. The term suggests legacy, persistence, recall of something vanished. It's a subdued confession that even the Sumerians viewed themselves not as trailblazers, but as receivers of insight that outlasted them, insight that had weathered an awfulness severe enough to demand reconstruction. And should you peer intently at select tablets, you might still spot them, fingerprints embedded into the soft clay prior to baking, the singular swirls and lines of a copyist who dwelled 6,000 years ago. That individual clutched this alert, formed these signs, and propelled them onward through eras, uncertain if any would comprehend, yet yearning that some would heed. At times, the key element of a dispatch isn't its content, but the prior awareness it presumes in you. The Sumerian tablets skip explanations of why the firmament holds peril. They presume you recall. They omit defenses for relentless scrutiny. They presume you get it. They log loops, rhythms, comeback designs, as though their audience already grasped that particular items reappear, that certain times bear heightened peril, that the upper realms adhere to a cadence of menace and relief. That presumption, that offhand ease with stellar peril, renders the hush surrounding these writings so profound. Come evening, as galleries shut, a synthetic glow dims from the exhibit holders. I picture those tablets sighing in the gloom, each clutching a sliver of recall from an existence we view now through haze. We label the Sumerians the dawn of society, but perhaps they formed the residue of an elder realm, the remainders of a world that grasped too tardily to guard the skies. And as arid gusts sweep past the remnants of Uruk and Eridu, bearing specks of primeval grit into yet another era, you might nearly catch the query their tablets truly posed. If we outlasted the blaze once earlier, how do we ensure it finds us ready next time? Thus the query shifts to, what precisely were they scanning for? The reply commences in the grit. When Leonard Woolley's crew arrived at Ur in 1922, his laborers had already labored weeks clearing heaps of packed sand from ages. The tell, that signature hill form signaling interred urban areas throughout Mesopotamia, towered almost 60 feet over the adjacent plain. Underneath, level after level of dwelling compressed like leaves in a volume penned in mortar and cinders. Yet it proved the holy enclosure that halted him abruptly. The ziggurat's base slab aimed exactly at the heliacal emergence of Sirius. Its extra platform synced with the Pleiades at their peak. And etched upon the entry slabs were no invocations but bearings, angle figures kept in sexagesimal script, the identical numeric approach we apply now to split rounds and gauge duration. This held no ornament, it formed measurement gear. Woolley jotted in his diary that evening, "We uncovered no shrine. We uncovered a lookout post, masked as one." And he wasn't the sole observer. Throughout southern Iraq, each principal dig of the 1920s and 1930s disclosed the identical scheme. At Eridu, the most enduringly inhabited urban spot in Sumer, 7 sanctuaries layered one atop the next, each base synced to follow the equinox procession, a 26,000-year loop demanding unbroken scrutiny over lineages to spot. At Nippur, the Holy Zone's yard shaped a flawless viewing tool for tracing Venus via its 584-day loop. These urban centers didn't expand naturally near springs or commerce lanes. They sat placed by stellar layout as if their spots had been picked expressly to measure the firmament. But the tablets, ever the tablets, bore the true burden. In 1924, a German team at Uruk revealed a shut room below what once served as a scribal school. Within, more than 5,000 clay records, many yet in their starting wicker holders. Most formed routine grain counts, work packs, the everyday paperwork of town existence. But blended in were writings of an altogether other sort. One set, later indexed as the Enuma Anu Enlil, held 70 tablets focused solely on heavenly portents. Not tales, not pleas. Portents of cause linking sky happenings to ground outcomes. When the scarlet star holds in the east, hunger will trail. If the crossing star shows in Abu's month, have the ruler strengthen the town. When the fire-scattering star moves through the bull, forbid night journeys for any soul. The phrasing stayed detached, factual, free of flowery additions. These served as operational papers used by clerics tasked with foreseeing peril. And then existed the odder writings, bits that evaded the mold. One tablet recounted the sky stone that dropped in King Lugalbanda's era, which vitrified the plot and vaporized the stream. Another logged the day the gale arrived cloudless and the skyline scorched with no blaze kindled. A third cautioned of the star whose train spans the upper reaches like a gash, ushering the dust epoch. For years, experts shelved these as fable. Simile, the raw psyche's bid to account for earthly upheavals via godly retribution. But then a check of the timelines occurred. Numerous of these fabled incidents synced with verified weather oddities seen in frozen core samples and ground study. The dust epoch synced with a logged volcanic chill. The vitrified plot aligned with strike melt traces at select Mesopotamian spots. The scorched skyline fit the air conditions of a large overhead blast. These formed no fables. They stood as logs. All the while, far down in the dig strata, diggers kept unearthing items clashing with all they held true of societal growth. Sumer burst forth abruptly. The prior urban spots, Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, all displayed complete town intricacy from their base levels. No bridge stage, no slow gathering of insight. They arose bearing script systems already uniform, numeric bases already intricate, and star lore already sharp. It resembled a lever pulled. At Eridu, the initial shrine tier clocks to about 5,400 BC, over 1,000 years pre-Sumer's formal launch. Still, this prime edifice showed heavenly sync. Even its base rocks carried angle figures. The insight didn't grow on site. It arrived ready. One French digger reviewing the layering at Lagash wrote in his summary, "We persist in excavating, hoping to hit the origin. Instead, we hit polish stacked on polish, as though we're unburying the close of something, not its outset." And then arrived the Mul Apen. Unearthed in pieces over various locations and laboriously pieced back, the Mul Apen Star Index endures as one of antiquity's most striking papers in star study. It enumerates each chief star group seen from Mesopotamian widths, notes their ascent and descent moments all year, follows the 5 seen worlds' paths, and computes moon gaps with jarring correctness. Today's star watchers have checked it against machine recreations of the old night dome. The Sumerians nailed it. Not roughly, not emblematically, but spot on. But nestled amid the index's crisp technique lay odd extras. Select stars bore alert icons. Particular dates got tagged as risky, and a full part outlined what they named the destroyer's route. A course via the firmament that came back when the year tally ends. The writing pinned this comeback to loops of 60 times 60 years, 3,600 years. A rhythm matching no world motion, but syncing eerily with certain extended comet path designs. In 1953, a fresh decoder named Samuel Kramer was sorting tablets in Philadelphia's University Museum when he spotted an item prompting him to summon his peers. It formed a portent writing from Sippar, clocked to roughly 2100 BC. But unlike fellow portents sketching bygone happenings or current loops, this one stuck to prospective phrasing all through. When the crossing star re-enters the bull's route in the era of longest shades, have the folk scan the north firmament at daybreak. If blaze shows Sand's ascent, ruin trails. This stands penned so later, one's grasped the tally. The writing then offered a figure, a reverse count rooted in star loops, seeming to thrust over 1,000 years past the penning date. Kramer's side note on his rendering just said, "Foreseeing starcraft, but foreseeing suggests soothsaying, speculation, sacred sight." This formed wholly other. This marked a society that had pinned a design, a perilous repeating design, and sought to alert their offspring to its comeback. The puzzle dogging experts wasn't if the Sumerians held elevated starcraft. The proof rendered that beyond doubt. The puzzle stood why. Why might humankind's prime urban society pour such vast toil into firmament scrutiny? Why raise shrines as watchposts? Why devise numeric setups tailored to trace upper loops? Why guard star indexes over bloodlines with such devout zeal? Unless a motive lay behind, unless the firmament had already shown its peril, unless they aimed to guarantee it never found them off guard once more. If these alerts proved foreseeing, if the Sumerians could truly foresee upper peril, then amid their star logs, somewhere must lurk proof of what drove them to scan the dome with such fervor. And if that proof endures, what did they behold that we let fade? The reply hides not in Sumerian creeds, but in their gauges. In 1900, a Jesuit cleric and number expert named Johann Strassmayer was sifting Babylonian tablets at the British Museum when he met an item shaking his grasp of old mind power. The tablet clocked to about 1800 BC, but plainly recopied from far elder Sumerian roots, held a numeric grid following Venus showings over 21 years' span. The loop it sketched, 584 days from one hill climb to the next, hit true within hours of current star figuring. But what jarred Strassmayer wasn't the sharpness, it was the hint. To hit this crispness demanded unbroken scrutiny over several bloodlines. Numeric bases for guessing world paths and a setup pledge to logging, implying Venus tracing, held no scholarly whim. It formed vital. The tablet skipped the why. It just logged the figures as if the reader grasped its weight already. Fellow seekers started linking like strands. The Emule Apin Index skipped mere star listing. It followed their acts through duration. It marked which star groups climbed pre-dawn in set months, which worlds took backward paths, and which upper happenings synced with time shifts. But hid within these notes lay designs bearing no tie to farming or cleric oversight. Select dates bore the Sumerian icon for peril. Precise star setups got alert tags, and one repeating mark showed all through. The era, the dome parts. Current star watchers knew what the Sumerians sketched, shooting star rains, but not mere rains, foreseen ones. The Perseids in August, the Leonids in November, and above all the Taurids from late October to early November, when our globe cuts a rubble zone so packed that old domes blazed with tumbling lights night upon night. The Sumerians had charted these flows with jarring sharpness. Their shrines synced not just to worlds and star groups. They aimed at the glow spots of known shooting star rains, the dome spots where falling stars seemed to spring at the ziggurat's northwest edge, synced exactly with the torrid glow as it showed in 3000 BC. At Eridu, view paths cut into the Holy Yard aimed at that same dome area amid the flow's top force. At Nippur, star tablets logged the fire rain season with dates syncing today's figures for when the torrid flow ran hottest in history. This held no sacred emblem. This formed aiming. But why might a society trace shooting star rains with such zeal? Most falling stars flare out safely in the high air, making naught but short light trails. They're lovely, sure, but scarcely menacing unless the Sumerians knew a truth we're just now reclaiming. In the 1980s, star watcher Victor Klube and Space Force expert Bill Napier put forth what they termed the coherent catastrophism idea. They held that our globe's path cycles us via space zones, holding not just grit and stones, but bigger bits, rocks, home-scale items, even tiny worlds, all leftovers of old comets shattered over ages. The torrid shooting star flow, they held, formed no mere pretty glows. It stood a rubble zone with bits big enough to weather air passage, big enough to burst over towns, big enough to shift weather. And our globe cuts it double yearly. Most years we meet just the loose rims, thousands of safe shooting stars, not more. But every few ages our path hauls us via thicker packs, and every few thousand years we slice zones where the real menaces hide. When Klube and Napier charted the rawest overhead bursts in logged annals, Tunguska in 1908, Chelyabinsk in 2013, and likely old strikes guessed from ground clues, they spotted a design. Many hit amid our globe's cut via the torrid flow or its linked rubble clouds. The Sumerians, it appeared, had traced the selfsame menace. Their tablets logged what they named the Bull of Heaven, the star group Taurus, seat of the Pleiades bunch, and the sharp dome zone whence the torrid shooting stars seemed to spread. But the Sumerians sketched it not with honor, they sketched it with alarm. One writing cautions, when Mul rises beside the sun, have the guards stand set. When the bull cuts the route of the roving stars, ruin steps with soft tread. Another tablet dug at Larsa in the 1930s bore figures baffling decoders for decades. It sketched the crossing star via a number line matching no known world path. The loop repeated every 3,600 years, way too long for any seen world, yet sharp enough to hint real scrutiny over fable crafting. In 2007, Czech star watchers ran machine runs of the torrid flow's growth over the last 10,000 years. They spotted its thickness swings on long loops, eras of stepped-up and stepped-down peril fueled by pull shifts from Jupiter and Saturn. One such loop synced the Sumerian 3,600-year tally near exactly. The hints landed like chill rock. The Sumerians weren't guessing star signs. They were guessing strike peril slots. Eras when our globe's path would haul us via the rawest zones of an elder rubble field they had somehow learned to trace. But how? How might a Copper Age society pin path loops needing grasp of pull rules, three-way dome motion, and number shaping over ages? The sole sound reply was one experts shunned for decades. They took the insight as legacy. The Sumerian writings themselves nod to this. They spoke of the Apkallu, 7 wise ones who showed post the vast floods and guided humankind to remake. They sketched an age pre-urban spots when insight came granted, not unearthed. They used turns like the elder tally and the tally from prior, as if their star bases outlasted their own society. And when seekers eyed the prime Sumerian star writings more keenly, they unearthed something wondrous. The star spots in the oldest tablets didn't sink the dome as it showed in 3500 BC. They synced the dome as it showed circa 10,800 BC, the close of the last frost era. Someone had eyed the upper reaches far longer than logged annals implied. Someone had traced these loops via ruin and fall, and the Sumerians had taken their alerts as heirloom. Amid the tablets, select items showed again under varied labels, but steady sketches. Returning stars, crossing stars, stars hauling warmth, the season-coming destroyer. Current starcraft has now pinned the true items these sketches likely stood for. Comet Enki, a short-loop comet circling the Sun every 3.3 years and the source of the torrid shooting star flow. The torrid rubble zone proper, a huge haze of comet bits our globe cuts yearly. Likely leftovers of the younger Dryas strike swarm, the bits that might have sparked the ruinous slide back to frost grip 12,800 years past. And further unnamed items yet veiled in the flow's thickest parts, biding the path rules that will one day bring us nose to nose anew. The Sumerians had labeled these items Jahilu, Nibiru, Lugalmul. They had traced their comebacks. They had figured their peril eras. They had raised shrines to scan for them and shaped cleric ranks whose lone role was to keep the tally. Not since the dome stood blessed, since the dome stood menacing. Why might the globe's prime society pour such vast means into tracing ruinous items unless their forebears had seen one hit already? Unless the recall of blaze tumbling from upper held no fable, but annals they balked to let fade. The proof stands penned in the ground itself. In 2007, a crew of ground experts led by Richard Firestone put out finds that would shake our grasp of human elder days to the core. They had sifted ground cores from scores of spots over North America, Europe, and the Near East. Earth tiers logging the air conditions of the late Pleistocene epoch, the last frost era's end tail. What they unearthed in a slim, dark edge tier clocked to about 10,800 BC froze them. Nano-diamonds, tiny carbon frames born only under raw crush and blaze, the sort born of upper strikes or atom blasts. Pull balls, wee orbs of liquid stone snap-frozen mid-flight, iridium buildups, the hallmark trace of outer stuff, and a carbon-packed mat holding the burned rests of what seemed land-wide blazes. The tier showed over manifold lands, ever at the same depth, ever with the same makeup. 10,800 years passed, something swift, fierce, and worldwide. They named it the Younger Dryas Strike happening. The weather log shows what trailed with harsh sharpness. In decades, worldwide heats dived. Frost sheets that had pulled back surged frontward once more. Whole life webs crashed. The giant beasts that had weathered hundreds of thousands of frost swings, mammoths, fang-toothed cats, huge earth sloths, died out in ages, and the rising human setups of the Near East. Those early holds just testing farming and fixed building vanished from dig logs for over 1,000 years. The globe had reset, but not all let slip. When seekers eyed the spread of strike stand-ins, those ground marks of upper ruin, they spotted buildups over the Fertile Arc, the self-same zone where Sumerian society would later spring. Spots in Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, all bore signs of high blaze happenings, melt glass shapes, jarred quartz, and ground tiers signaling abrupt fierce heat. One spot especially caught eye. Abu Huraira, a hold in North Syria, bore a clear scorch tier clocked to the Younger Dryas edge. The tier held glass-like carbon shapes and liquid building stuff, heats way past what a usual blaze could birth. When seekers eyed the aim pattern of the liquid stuff, they found it synced a huge overhead burst, the sort when a big shooting star bursts in the air pre-ground hit. The blow would have leveled all for scores of miles. The heat wave would have lit blazes over hundreds of square miles. The jolt wave would have rung the full zone. And if any lived to see it, they would never let fade what they eyed. The query grew, did those recalls last long enough to touch the Sumerians? Dig-proof hints they did. The oldest tiers of Sumerian urban spots, those odd bases that sprang swift with intricate insight intact, rest atop elder hold rests, bearing marks of ruinous desertion. Betwixt the pre-Younger Dryas dwells, and the Sumerian remake lies a grim span. Thin folk, slight building, a globe in endure mode. But when the urban spots resurfaced, they did so with a fixation. They eyed the dome. Yet the Younger Dryas stood not the lone strike happening shaping the ancient Near East. In the late 1990s, old weather expert Harvey Weiss studied the fall of the Akkadian Empire, the mighty realm rising post-Sumer, and briefly joining Mesopotamia under one head. The realm had bloomed over a century, then vanished with raw swiftness, circa 2200 BC. The usual account blamed inner rule fall, or war raid. But Weiss unearthed else in the zone's ground cause, a vast dust happening. Circa 2200 BC, dirt samples from the Middle East showed a swift jump in air dust, chem marks signaling dry spells and signs of quick social crash. Farmholds left, urban spots shrank, trade webs broke. This formed the 4.2 kilo-year happening, a weather ruin so raw it left traces in ground logs from Greenland to Africa. But what sparked it? Some seekers eyed volcano bursts or seaflow shifts. Others marked the timing synced with known shooting star-rain step-up eras. And when they eyed select dig spots closer, they found the self-same stand-ins marking the Younger Dryas, balls, melt glass, and signs of raw heat happenings. The chance rose that the 4.2 kilo-year happening held not just dry, it held strikes, overhead bursts, and air dust load from upper roots, and the Sumerian tablets had logged it. Writings from that span sketch the day the sun hid, years sans crop. The gale hauling no wet but shading the dome for eras. One portent tablet cautions, when the crossing star shows in Abu's month, hunger trails for 7 years. The clock synced, the sketches synced, even the 7-year stretch synced with weather stand-in logs showing drawn-out chill post the first jolt. Then lay the 3.2 kilo-year happening circa 1200 BC, another worldwide crash wrecking Copper Age setups over the Mediterranean and Near East. Urban spots burned, realms toppled, folk moved in huge tides, seeking endure. Again the ground showed dust, again the weather log showed swift chill, and again select seekers found proof hinting upper strike fed the ruin. A design rose, not of chance ruins, but repeating ones spaced by ages or millennia, ever leaving the selfsame marks, ever recalled in fable, since the fables proper held the design. When experts aligned making and ruin tales from the old globe, they found striking steadiness in the parts. The Sumerian Eridu Genesis sketches the dome raining blaze and the ground veiled in gloom pre the vast flood. The Egyptian ruin of humankind recounts the goddess Sekhmet hauling scorching gale from upper that near-wrecked humankind. The Hittite Ulukumi lay speaks of stone tumbling from dome and the ground quaking 7 days. These held no lyrical twists on a motif. They sketched the selfsame order of happenings, air passage, heat wave, jolt wave, drawn-out gloom from air dust, weather crash, flooding as air design shifted. It formed the strike mark. And when seekers charted the spot spread of these fables, they found they bunched sharp in zones bearing ground proof of strike happenings. The Middle East, the Mediterranean Bowl, and the Fertile Arc. The yarns held no crafting, they held passing. Line after line, the endures handed down what they had eyed. The shrines held the notes, the clerics kept the tallies, and at length the Sumerians took the full store, the insight that the dome could turn on you, the grasp that set designs repeated, and the numeric bases needed to guess when the peril might come back. In 2013, seekers sifting frost cores from Greenland unearthed tiny bits of outer stuff spread via tears-sinking known logged ruins. The bits bore the chem mark of the torrid shooting star flow, the selfsame rubble zone the Sumerians had traced so keenly. The strikes held no theory, they held no emblem. They stood real, repeating, and guessable enough that an old society had poured its full star setup into scanning for them. The ground log and the fable log held no clash. They held backing of the self-same grim fact. Our globe cycles via space zones where strike peril jumps rawly. And the Sumerians knew it since their forebears had lived it. If the Sumerians took recalls of bygone strikes, did they take guides too on how to scan for the next? And if those guides lived in their tablets, if the figures, the peril eras, the upper marks all endure yet, held in clay, what just were they aiming to tell us of the loop we might dwell in this instant? The reply hides in the tablets proper. In 1881, British digger Hormuzd Rassam unearthed something wondrous below the Shamash shrine ruins in Sippar. The room had shut on purpose, not ditched in rush, but shut with care, as if someone sought to hold what lay within for an era needing it once more. Within lay thousands of tablets, many tied to a set known as Enuma Anu Enlil, the lengthiest and fullest portent gather from the old globe. The set grew at length to 70 tablets spanning every thinkable upper happening. Eclipses, world joins, shooting star shows, odd cloud shapes, and air wonders. For decades, experts treated them as old wives' tales. The raw mind's bid to find sense in chance dome happenings. Portents stood book tools, they held, not fact notes. But then someone truly tested that hold. In 2003, a crew of star watchers and star lore experts led by John Steele at Durham University started running number checks on the upper happenings sketched in Enuma Anu Enlil. They matched the tablet guesses with machine runs of the old dome, seeking ties betwixt guessed happenings and true star occurrences. What they unearthed jarred usual thought. The ties held no chance. The portents tying to eclipse guesses synced real eclipse loops with jarring sharpness. The tablets sketching world moves aligned with true backward eras, and most jarringly, the alerts of risky stars and blaze from upper synced sharp with top eras of known shooting star flows. These held no bookcrafts. They stood working guesses rooted in ages of piled scrutiny. But the phrasing proper unveiled something deeper. The tablets didn't sketch upper happenings with the loose verse of fable. They used craft terms, sharp angle figures, time tags, and span tallies. One part sketches a star whose route cuts 7 sky splits in Tishri's month, hauling with it the dust season and the crops fail. When seekers figured what item could cut 7 dome splits, roughly 70 sky degrees, in 1 month, one chance fit, a comet on a set path type, one hauling it near our globe in fall. The Sumerians weren't sketching gods, they were sketching path rules. The Mulopin Index unveiled even more. This gather, whose oldest copies clock to circa 1000 BC, but plainly drawn from far elder roots, didn't just list star groups. It traced rhythms. It marked which upper bodies came back in guessable loops and which showed unevenly. It tagged set stars with the icon decoders, at length knew meant risky or ruinous. Every star tagged with that icon synced a glow spot for a chief shooting star flow. The Pleiades tagged risky in late October and early November sharp when the torrid flow tops. The star group Mul, the cluster, flagged as menacing in eras when our globe cuts thick rubble zones. Alpha Tauri, noted as the crimson star hauling hunger, seen in known weather odd eras. These held no fable links. They stood hazard alerts. But the rawest unearths came from a tablet subset experts had shelved as vague aim for over a century. One set from Sipar bore keen sketches of what the copyists named Lugal, the Ruin Lord. The tablets sketch this item with odd sharpness, the ruined star whose train burns copper-like, whose route curves via the bull, whose comeback tags the bloodline tally. For years, seekers held this a fable form, maybe a war deity or fiend. But when they eyed the sketch phrasing keener, they knew it matched naught in Mesopotamian fable. It matched a comet. The train burning copper-like sketched the hallmark orange-red shine of charged sodium in a comet's haze. The curving route nodded to the bent line comets draw via the dome as they round the sun. And the bull stood Taurus, the sharp star group tied to the torrid shooting star flow. The tablet pressed on to give figures, a number line sketching path spans, join gaps, and comeback loops. When star watchers turned these from base 60 Sumerian script to current worths, they unearthed something wondrous. The figures sketched the path span of comet Enki, the torrid flow's source, with under 1% error edge. A Copper Age copyist had logged a set comet's path rules with near-current sharpness. But how? The Soul Sound account stood scrutiny legacy. Someone somewhere had traced this item over manifold comebacks spanning ages or millennia, and that insight had held and passed till it hit Sumer's copy halls. Then, in 2007, a grad learner named Sarah Kowal was sorting bits from the British Museum's Sipper Gather when she spotted an item misfiled as routine paper. It formed a portent writing, but unlike any other. Most portent tablets use bygone or current phrasing. When the crimson star showed, hunger trailed. This tablet stuck wholly to prospective phrasing. When the crossing star re-enters the bull's route in the year 3 kings topple, ruin shall tread the ground. The tablet then gave a time figure, a reverse count rooted in moon loops, sun years, and the equinox precession loop. When Kowal worked the numbers with star consultant aid, they knew the tablet thrust forward roughly 1,800 years from its penning clock. It formed a guess, not a log, and the upper setup it sketched. Venus's sync with the Pleiades amid a set moon knot while our globe cut the torrid flow would stand a top peril case when manifold danger bits joined at once. The copyists sought to guess a strike slot near 2 ages into their future. Fellow guessing writings rose from gallery gathers once seekers knew what to seek. A tablet from Uruk sketched the season fire shall come back in the tally when Akkad's king rules no more. A nod clocking the guest post the Akkadian fall in 2200 BC. Another from Nippur cautioned of the scorching gale coming cloudless in the bloodline when the sea gulps the urban spots. These held no loose foretells. They stood sharp guesses tied to star figures and logged timelines. But the rawest chill writing came from a bit unearthed in Pennsylvania University's stores, overlooked for decades since its state made decoding tough. When at length decoded, it read, "This stands penned for later ones. When the tally hits its close, when the crossing star re-enters the start spot, scan the dome at daybreak in the dying light season. If blaze shows where none should, know the alert era has shut. What trails cannot turn, only endure. Let readers of these words, ready as our sires readied, as their sires readied, pre the waters rose. The writing shut with a number line. Another reverse count, another figure thrusting via time. When seekers figured what year that reverse count thrust to, counting calendar gaps and precession drift, they hit a span, making them halt. The thrust fell in the current age. How might a Copper Age copyist guess an Upper Peril ages or millennia ahead? Unless what we term guesses held never foretells at all, but alerts rooted in eyed loops that old star watchers had traced over time spans we scarce grasp, designs they knew since they had eyed their wake before, figures they held in clay since they grasped with grim sharpness that the dome's turn stood never a matter of whether, only when. But insight sans use stands just annals. The Sumerians didn't merely log these loops, they shaped their full society round scanning them. In 1922, when Leonard Woolley first charted Ur's holy setup, he marked something odd in the ziggurat's build. The frame had remade manifold times over ages, yet each turn held the self-same angle ties. Glows would turn visible. The Nana shrine, the moon deities, sat at the ziggurat base with its door facing sharp 13 degrees north of east, not any main compass, but the northmost moon climb amid the 18.6-year moon standstill loop when the moon hits its top slant and tide pulls peak. These held no beauty picks. They stood tools. Fellow holy setups showed the self-same design. At Eridu, Sumer's prime urban spot, 7 shrines layered one atop next, spanning near 2 ages. Digger first saw this as sacred hold rebuilding holy ground on holy dirt. But when star watcher Edwin Krupp eyed the sinks in the 1990s, he unearthed each remake had mildly tuned the aim to count precession. The slow globe axis sway shifting seen star spots over ages. Someone held tune. Eridu's Enki shrine aimed at Sirius's heliacal climb in 5000 BC. By 3000 BC, precession had moved Sirius's climb spot by near 2 degrees. The next shrine remake fixed this sway, retuning to trace Sirius's fresh spot. The clerics held no tradition. They updated gear. And it held not just the build, the rite's proper coded star timing. The Akitu rite, Sumer's top sacred act, hit amid spring equinox when light and dark balanced. But hid in the rite writings lay odd parts fitting no spirit read. The act lasted sharp 11 days. In that span, clerics had to do notes at daybreak, noon, dusk, and midnight. They logged Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and moon spots. They marked any odd lights in the dome. And on the last night they held an all-night guard sharp-eyeing the east skyline betwixt Taurus and Aries star groups, the sharp dome zone whence the torrid shooting star flow spreads. The clock held no whim either. The spring equinox tagged when our globe's path started hauling it toward the day torrid flow. The rubble zone part we meet in late June and early July, though less thick than the fall flow. The rite held no spring cheer. It marked the start of stepped-up peril season. Fellow rites followed the self-same design. Uruk's fall rites hit in late October sharp when the torrid flow hits top force. The moon rites traced eclipse peril eras. The fire feast synced with the Perseid shooting star-top. What experts had read as farm timing or time cheer stood truly a dome scan calendar, a society-wide first alert setup masked as sacred duty. But maybe rawest stood the cleric rank itself. Sumerian clerics held no pick for spirit zeal. They picked for number skill and trained in star scrutiny. Copy halls taught shape, figuring, and upper rules alongside fable and rite. The lessons held keen teaching on naming meteor kinds, splitting worlds from stars, and figuring path spans. Cleric rank formed a learner term and used starcraft, and the fable they taught held no whim either. When seekers eyed Sumerian deity traits and yarns, they unearthed something jarring. Each chief god tied not to human goods or nature pulls, but to set upper menaces. Enlil, air lord, held no gale deity. He stood the shape of air-jolt waves. His fables sketched him hauling the gale-flattening urban spots, the rainless storm, the breath shading the sun. These held no similes for weather. They stood sketches of overhead burst happenings, the burst blow of shooting stars in the air, birthing oversound jolt waves able to level builds miles from the strike spot. Nergal, under realm ruler, oversaw not end, but below blaze, the overhot ruin tied to strikes. His icon stood scorched ground. His sacred beast stood the lion for gulping flame, and his rites hit in eras when strike peril stats jumped. Inanna, love and war goddess, tied to Venus, but not the charmed dusk star Venus. She linked to Venus's risky shows, eras when its path halted eye close to the torrid glow, birthing top peril sinks. Her twin side, charm and force, coded the grasp that Venus's spot could tag safety or menace per its tie to fellow upper tags. Even the making fables held star coding. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's making lay drawn from Sumerian roots, sketches Marduk wrecking Tiamat by firing shafts splitting her frame. Current readers see fable, but the writing gives craft parts. Tiamat spread her bits via the upper, making the band circling the dome. It's sketching a rubble zone birth, and world or comet shattering into the bit stream our globe would cycle meet. The creed held no account of human roots. It held account of menace roots, and holding that insight needed setup. At Nippur, diggers unearthed what they first named a book house, a build holding thousands of tablets sorted by theme. But when they eyed the holds keener, they knew it worked more like a data store. Tablets logged night notes going back ages. Others held figures updating prior guesses per fresh data. Some showed fixes to elder models, tracing how well guesses hit fact. It stood a seek hub. The clerics held no mere dome scan. They ran a many bloodline fact plan shaped to hone strike guess models over time spans longer than single human spans. And they took their duty with deathly gravity. Tablets from Sipar sketched the penalty for clerics failing right guard in set peril eras. Banish, good seas, at times end. Fellow writings outline the rule for reporting odd upper happenings, whom to tell, how swift alerts spread, what ready civil heads should do. The society had shaped a full paper setup round upper menace scan. But maybe rawest mark came from writing sketching young cleric training. One teaching tablet spelled, "You grasp not these tallies for no glory. You grasp them since your grandsire's grandsire scanned, and his grandsire pre him, and one day your grandson's grandson must scan in your stead. The dome let slip naught. We must let slip naught." It stood a society recall setup, a way to hold key insight over bloodline gaps that else would wipe it. The rites kept folks scanning. The fable made the peril stick. The cleric rank guaranteed the craft insight lived rule shifts and culture swings. They had shaped a hub shaped to outlast any single head, bloodline, or even realm, since the menace they scanned worked on time spans far longer than human rule frames. If their rites stood alerts masked as adoration, if their shrines stood watchposts masked as blessed spots, If their full creed setup stood truly a endure tool coded in spirit tongue to guarantee its hold over ages. Whom stood they seeking to guard? And more pressing, whom do those alerts reach via the hush of 5,000 years to guard? Now the reply needs grasping what the Sumerians named Nibiru, the crossing star. For decades this term sat at the uneasy join of true seek and edge guess. Folk scribes held it, knotted a veiled world on crash path with our globe. Grave experts brushed it as fable with no starbase, but neither band had eyed keenly what the tablets truly said. When tongue expert Zecharia Sitchin spread the Nibiru idea in the 1970s, he turned it as crossing world and built vast theories round it. Mainstream experts rightly hit his way, but in shunning his read, they quit keen eye of the prime writings. It held not till the 1990s that a fresh band of seekers turned to the root stuff with new gaze. The Sumerian term Nibiru springs from Nibiru, to cut or cross, but the writings never named it a world. They sketched it as Caucaseed, a star, or sharper any bright upper item, not the sun or moon, setting mattered. And when seekers eyed every Nibiru show in star writings, they found it held no single item at all. It stood a wonder. The tablet sketched Nibiru as the star cutting the roots, the messenger showing in eras, the item whose comeback tags the tally. Varied writings gave it varied spots, at times in Taurus, at times in Cancer, at times spanning manifold star groups. One writing sketched it as the star spreading smaller stars in its route. It held no world, it stood a shooting star flow. And when seekers pinned which flow the Sumerians sketched, the full riddle snapped clear. In 1983, star watchers Victor Klube and Bill Napier put out a paper shaking our grasp of upper menace to the core. They held our globe's path hauls us double yearly via the torrid shooting star flow, a huge rubble zone born of a giant comet shatter roughly 20,000 to 30,000 years past. Most years we meet just the spread rims, lovely shooting star rains, safe light trails flaring 60 miles overhead, but the rubble holds no even spread. Pull swings from Jupiter and Saturn birth thick knots, zones where bits bunch, holding items big enough to weather air passage. Our globe's path at times hauls us via these knots. When that hits, we see no pretty shooting star rains. We meet what Russians met in 1908 over Tunguska, a huge overhead burst leveling 800 square miles of woods with 15 megaton blow force, or what witnesses sketched in Chelyabinsk 2013 when a shooting star burst over the urban spot with 30 times Hiroshima bomb force, shattering panes over 6 urban spots and harming over 1,600 souls. Both happenings hit when our globe cut the torrid flow. The flow's rubble zone stands huge. Our globe takes weeks to cut it full. We meet it double per year. The day torrids in late June via early July, and the night torrids in late October via early November. The fall flow stands thicker, riskier, and set sharp for old scanners to eye. Its glow spot, the dome spot, whence shooting stars seem to spring, lies in Taurus star group betwixt the Pleiades and the bright crimson star Aldebaran, sharp where Sumerian writings said to scan for Nibiru. When seekers started matching Sumerian upper sketches with current grasp of the torrid flow, the matches turned beyond doubt. The tablet sketched the season the bull hauls blaze, late October, when the torrid flow peaks. They cautioned of the star-spreading smaller stars, a sharp sketch of a shooting star glow. They marked this wonder comes back when the tally shuts, nodding not to a single path, but to loops of stepped-up thickness in the flow. And rawest, they traced it with the self-same star groups current starcraft uses to chart the Taurid setup: Taurus, the Pleiades, and Orion, the sharp dome zone the rubble field holds. But the Sumerians grasped something current fact just late reclaimed. The Taurid flow's peril holds no steady. It swings in many age and many millennia loops. In 2015, Czech Star Watcher crew, led by Pavel Spurny, put out Seek modeling the Taurid flow's frame and thickness swings over the last 10,000 years. Using pull machine run and path rules, they unearthed the flow bear's looped step-up, eras, when our globe's path cuts thicker rubble packs. These step-up eras hit roughly every 2,500 to 3,000 years, fueled by Jupiter's pull-hauling bits to tighter paths. In these slots, strike peril jumps by order sizes. Small overhead bursts turn likely. Large overhead bursts turn possible. Society-shifting happenings turn stats probable. The Seek crew pinned several logged eras of likely Taurid step-up. Circa 10,800 BC, the Younger Dryas Edge. Circa 4,200 BC, early Copper Age weather break. Circa 2,200 BC, the 4.2 kiloyear happening and Akkadian fall, and thrust forward in the current age. When old star seekers matched these clocks with Sumerian loop figures, something wondrous rose. The 3,600-year span, repeated in star writings, held no world path. It stood roughly the gap betwixt chief Taurid step-up peaks, the comeback the Sumerians traced. The numbers held no full match, but close enough to hint the Sumerians had pinned the design via scrutiny starcraft over many bloodlines. They knew the peril came in loops. They knew when our globe stood most open, and they shaped their full dome scan setup round scanning those slots. But the Taurid flow posed another riddle, making it rawly fearsome to old scanners. Eye ability. Unlike world menaces nearing from chance aims, the Taurid rubble travels roughly the selfsame path loop as our globe. That means risky bits near from the sun aim amid the day flow or from the twilight dome amid the night flow. Aims where they're tough to spot till the last breaths pre-strike. The Sumerians grasped this. Their alert writings repeated stress on scanning at daybreak and in dying light, the sharp times when Taurid items would turn visible against the brightening or darkening dome. They held no verse. They gave working scan guides. One tablet from Uruk gives keen direction. When the bull climbs with the sun in Arisamna's month, have the guards stand set at daybreak. If blaze shows in the east dome pre-sun, if light cuts sans noise, give the alarm at once. What comes will land swift. It's sketching the eye mark of a nearing shooting star. Shine sans noise, which lands later due to speed gap betwixt light and noise waves, showing at daybreak from east amid late October or early November. Arisamna in Sumerian calendar, when the Taurid glow climbs with the sun. This stands menace check, rule not fable. Current Seek has backed the Taurid flow, holds items big enough to pose true society tier menaces. In 2019, NASA's Atlas scan pinned manifold worlds in the Taurid setup, sizing 200 to 400 meters across, big enough that airstrike would free force like hundreds of megatons, able to wreck full zones. These items live in paths that cycle haul them close to our globe's root. Most cuts stand safe, but path rules hold no full steady. Close meets with worlds pull swings and clashes in the rubble zone proper can nudge bits to cutting lines. The Taurids hold no theory menace. They're a backed hazard with a logged strike annals and a future close meet clock already charted by current starcraft. And the Sumerians knew, when seekers gathered all torrid tide nods from Sumerian tablets and charted them against current grasp of the flow frame, thickness swings, and strike annals, they found the old writings had held sharp insight. The right time clock, late October, early November, for top peril. The right upper spot, Taurus star group betwixt Pleiades and Aldebaran. The right wonder, shooting star glow manifold items, varied forces. The right rhythm, step-up loops gauged in millennia, and rawest the right menace check, society end force amid top eras. This held no chance hit. It stood ordered scrutiny held over time spans, dwarfing current fact hubs. But one query lingered. How did they hit such sharpness? The reply seems to lie in something current starcraft takes as given: unbroken scrutiny spanning manifold loops. The Sumerians held no mere dome eye for a few bloodlines. Their star logs show proof of data gather spanning thousands of years, folding in notes predating their society by millennia. They took a data gather. Someone pre them, the younger Dryas strike, endures maybe or an even elder band had known the design and started logging it. Those logs weathered the ruins, held via the grim spans, and at length hit the Sumerian copyists who pressed the toil. The tablets held no start of the scan plan. They stood the mid-leaves of a far longer tale, and that tale thrust forward as pressing as it eyed back. If the Sumerians knew a design, if they traced the loops of stepped-up peril, if they figured when our globe's path would next haul us via the thickest torrid flow zones, did they see, too, when the next risky loop would come back? And if their figures lived in clay, held via realms and ages, thrusting toward a future they could scarce picture? What did those figures say of the loop we dwell through this instant? The reply hides veiled in the tongue proper. In 1956, tongue expert Samuel Noah Kramer put out what turned the standard Sumerian to English word book, the peak of decades decoding the globe's oldest penned tongue. But even Kramer marked something odd in his foreword. Set Sumerian terms bore what he named wary sharpness, words seeming too set, too craft for their supposed fable frame. Take gal, usual turn as great dome or upper sign. But when Kramer eyed its use over varied tablet kinds, he found it showed wholly in star writings, sketching risky wonders, never in sacred songs or bookworks. The term joined an, dome, gal, from and gal, to near or hold, word for word, that which nears from the dome. It held no verse tongue. It stood peril sort term. Fellow terms showed like designs. The Sumerian term udug, usual turn as gale, showed in frames where weather fit no sense. Tablets sketched udug happenings needing no clouds, hauling blaze sans bolt, flattening urban spots but leaving the stream untouched. When tongue experts sifted the part bits, they found ud, light, day, heat, gale, force, power, and ug, to split to break. Word for word the splitting force of heat and light. It stood sketching air bursts, the mark wonder of shooting star overhead bursts. The tongue held no simile, it stood check. Through the 2000s, the stand rims marked the spots where risky star groups first showed at daybreak. In high peril eras, cuts in the barriers framed set dome parts where shooting star, a fresh band of seekers, started using machine tongue to Sumerian writings, eyeing word count, frame bunch, and sense ties. What rose jarred. The Sumerians bore a full craft word set for upper menaces that current turners had rendered as fable imagery. Mulgir-Tab, the striking star, pre-Scorpio star group, Imdulgina, the dust gloom hauling gale, pre-evil gale, Naforgish Nu-Du, the falling stone, shooting star bit, but with set frame use splitting it from usual stones, Engula, the shine springing from dome, air passage flash. Each term bore sharp use rules, each showed in set guessing frames. Together they shaped what one-tongue expert named a cosmic ruin sort, an ordered sort set up for varied upper peril kinds and their eye traits. But the rawest unearths came from eyeing twin writings, tablets where the selfsame happenings stood logged in both Sumerian and later Akkadian. When the Akkadian realm took Sumer, copyists turned manifold elder writings to Akkadian, the Semite tongue dominating Mesopotamia next 2 ages. These turns gave a key bridge letting seekers check Sumerian senses against Akkadian reeds made by folk still grasping the prime frame. One such twin writing unearthed at Sippar sketched what Sumer named Misharu, the dome evil sweep. The Akkadian turn rendered it as Shalu Lemnu Shame, the evil heaven wind hauling hunger via gloom. The Akkadian side stood plain. This held no godly hit or nature weather. It stood an air wonder blocking sun causing crop fail. The writing pressed on to sketch the span, manifold eras. The dome show red-gray, and the trail weather bites chill despite summer, late spring. He stood sketching strike chill, the worldwide cooling when air dust from strikes blocks sunshine. Fellow twin writings showed the selfsame design. What Turners had rendered as fable dome fights or godly clashes stood craft sketches of scene-shooting star act with Akkadian sides plain, noting the farm and weather wake. The copyists held no fable crafting. They stood logging air ruins tied to upper happenings using set word sets, holding sharp eye part over tongue shifts. But maybe rawest stood the unearth of what seekers named guessing phrasing, grammar frames, sharp tagging guess over log. Sumerian bore varied verb sides for sketching happenings. Done acts used one mark set, ongoing states used another, and hoped future happenings used a third. When tongue experts eyed portent writings with this frame, they found most upper alerts used future side builds joined with if clauses. The grammar frame of guess not annals. A tablet from Nippur showed this plain. Mulgir tab kina, K4 demu U4.7, Kamhul Gishma word by word striking star, when moon with crosses, if day 7 in evil shall hold. Sure standard turn, when the striking star cuts the moon's route, ruin shall drop in the 7th season. The grammar held no doubt. This held no sketch of something bygone. It stood guessing something to come when set upper states joined, and the writing gave those states with star sharpness. The striking star showing in join with the moon amid a set phase with the wake showing in the 7th season, roughly 2 years later, letting for late weather bites from air dust load. When seekers checked current star word books, they found the only items plausibly cutting the moon's route, while matching Sumerian sketches, stood comets, or large shooting star flow bits, passing near our globe space. Sharp the item kind in the torrid setup. The Enuma Anu Enlil bore scores of such guesses, each using the selfsame grammar frames, each giving set upper setups, each thrusting wake forward in time rooted in eyed designs. But one tablet set took guess to a wondrous tier. Known as tally tablets for their thick use of number lines, these writings seem to figure future peril slots by joining manifold upper loops, moon knots, Venus comebacks, sun year tallies, and equinox precession. The numbers stood intricate, needing trace of scores of shifts over ages. One tablet from Uruk bore a figure spanning 4,440 years, 40 full loops of the 36-year Venus-Jupiter join span, plainly shaped to pin when manifold parallel bits would join at once. The writing shut and the tallies close when all roots cut the blaze shall come back as it did in the sire's time pre the waters. Pre the waters stood a steady Sumerian nod spot, their term for the pre-flood era, the time pre the younger Dryas flood remade the globe. The writing stood plain, linking future guesses to that elder ruin, hinting the copyists grasped they traced the self-same repeating wonder that had wrecked their forebears. Current seekers trying to back the figure found themselves stunned when they thrust the Sumerian tally forward from the tablet's penning clock, roughly 2400 BC, counting calendar gaps and the varied upper loops traced. The figure pointed to a parallel slot falling betwixt 1400 AD, the mid-age warm span. Logged annals from that era log odd air wonders, crop fails in manifold zones, and scores of logged shooting star happenings of odd force. While no back-chief strike hit, star watchers now know our globe cut a thicker-than-usual torrid flow zone in that span. The Sumerian figure had pinned and true stepped-up parallel slot 2,000 years pre it hit. Fellow tally tablets thrust even further with some figures stretching 3,600 years or more from their penning, placing their aim slots in our current era or near future. The hints stood tough to brush. The Sumerians held no mere log of bygone strikes. They had shaped a guessing frame intricate enough to guess future parallel eras rooted in the path rules of repeating rubble flows. And they had coded this insight in tongue shape to weather turn, guaranteeing that even if later bloodlines lost the skill to read Sumerian, the key alerts might live in drawn tongues like Akkadian, which would at length sway Hebrew, Arabic, and Greek star terms. The copyists had shaped a dispatch setup shaped to outlast their society. But that raised the last, rawest query. If they won, if their alerts did live, coded in tongue, held in tablets, biding for a future society sharp enough to grasp them, stood the Sumerians trying to log the clock of the next vast strike? And if we at length learned to read those alerts right, to grasp the loops they traced and the figures they held, what just do those elder voices tell us of the peril slot we're nearing now? The reply needed hauling all together, every bit of proof, every field, every puzzle part, piling over more than a century of seek. In 2018, a multi-land crew gathered sharp for this aim. Digger, star watchers, ground experts, tongue experts, and weather experts. Pros who usually worked alone gathered at Edinburgh University to try something never done, a full cross-field eye of the Sumerian strike idea. They named it the Mesopotamian Dome Menace Check Project. The crew's way stood ordered. They gathered every apt data spot from their fields, then eyed for ties, spots where lone proof lines joined on the selfsame closes sans prior join. The yields jarred. When old star watchers charted every Sumerian shrine sink they could back, a design rose. The frames held no chance aim toward charmed star groups. They aimed toward set dome zones amid set year times, and those times synced sharp with current figures of when our globe cuts the thickest torrid shooting star flow parts. Ur's ziggurat aimed toward the torrid glow amid late October 3000 BC. Eridu's holy setup tuned to trace the self-same zone amid its heliacal climb, letting clerics figure sharp when our globe's path would haul it into the rubble zone. Nippur's watchstand, shaped with view lines framing the top peril slot, giving eye backing when the risk era had hit. These held no sacred picks. They stood aim fixes for a trace riddle. All the while, tongue experts eyeing the Mul-Apen index marked something wondrous. The rhythms logged in the star tables, the loops of when set upper happenings would repeat, matched current star data for torrid flow thickness swings with wondrous sharpness. The Sumerian writings logged a chief loop of 3,600 years near the step-up span, pinned by Czech star watchers eyeing pull swings in the rubble zone. They logged a small loop of roughly 600 years, matching the seen bunch of logged strike happenings. And they traced an yearly loop tagging the risky eras, late October via November sharp, when the night torrid flow hits top act. The tie held no rough, it stood exact. But the rawest backing proof came from the ground crew. They had spent months sifting ground cores, frost samples, and dirt holds from the Middle East, seeking strike stand-ins, the body marks left by upper ruins. What they unearthed backed the clock the Sumerians had held in ground tiers, clocked to roughly 10,800 BC, the younger Dryas edge. They found the hoped marks, nanodiamonds, balls, raised iridium. The strike happening, the Sumerians nodded as the waters stood ground-backed. In Akkadian era, hold circa 2200 BC, the 4.2 kiloyear happening. They found proof of raw heat happenings, air dust load, and swift weather shift. The crash, the tablet sketched as the gloom season, left body scars in the ground. In Copper Age tiers circa 1200 BC, the 3.2 kiloyear happening, like marks showed. Upper dust, heat drops, farm crash. The ground log and the Sumerian star logs told the selfsame tale from varied views. But then the crew made an unearthed lifting all from fun tie to beyond doubt join, using heat sight satellite eye tech that spots underspot oddities. Veiled to usual eye, ground experts scanned the Mesopotamian plain, seeking strike frames. The zone's frequent floods and ages of dirt pile had veiled the face, but thickness gaps from elder strikes would yet show. They found over 40 round oddities sinking explosive overhead burst happenings. Most stood small, proof of items shattering in air, birthing local blow zones, but scores stood big, full round dips betwixt 500 and 2,000 meters across, showing jolt patterns, spread eject spreads, and squeezed ground tiers. These held no strike pits in the usual sense. Most shooting stars never hit ground whole. They stood overhead burst marks. The ghost steps left when huge items burst overhead, channeling their force downward in a tuned jolt wave, leaving the hallmark round scar. And when the crew matched the spots and guessed ages of these traits with Sumerian hold designs and writing nods, they found hits. One oddity near Old Lagash synced with a tablet sketch of the day the gale came cloudless, and the urban walls fell though no foe neared. Another near Eridu synced with nods to the scorching haze needing no wet, and the blaze tumbling from upper in King Masanapada's era. A third, raw big mark, northwest of Uruk, matched the rough clock and spot nodded in writing, sketching the stone, turning sand to glass, and the stream to vapor. The fable held no emblem. It stood eyewitness proof, held over ages. When the weather crew added their data, frost core samples showing raised upper dust bits amid the selfsame eras, tree ring logs tagging swift chill happenings, and pollen eye revealing swift plant die-offs, the picture fulled. Every lone proof line pointed to the selfsame close. Our globe had met repeating upper strikes through human society span. These strikes followed guessable designs tied to rubble flow meets, and the Sumerians had somehow pinned and traced those designs with wondrous sharpness. The crew put out their yields in 2019. The paper's close stood gauged but plain. The join of dig, star, ground, tongue, and weatherproof hints that Sumerian star writings stand an intricate bid to scan and guess upper strike peril rooted in fact notes spanning manifold ages. The sharpness of their peril slot pins, when matched with current torrid flow modeling tags, a tier of star insight pre-unheld to Copper Age societies. In Sikh tongue, it stood as near to "they nailed it" as learning lets. But the paper's last part posed a query the Sikh crew couldn't answer. The Sumerian figures thrust forward as well as back. Their tally tablets pinned future peril slots rooted in the loops they trace. And when those thrusts stretched using current star grasp of the Torrid Setup Act, scores of figures pointed to stepped-up peril eras in the late 20th and early 21st ages. Current star watchers eyeing the torrid flow loan hit like closes. Machine runs showed our globe's path hauling us via stepped-up thick rubble zone parts amid this era, not ruin thick, but sharp raised per late ages. The peril holds no full. Most items in the flow stand small, scores of years past Sand's hit, but the chance curve has moved. We're nearing one of those looped slots the Sumerians spent ages learning to know. And we're nearing it mostly unknowing. Sans the hub dome scan setup they shaped, sans the many bloodline note plans they held, sans the culture recall, keeping their society wake to a peril most current folk don't know lives. They traced these loops since they grasped what we're just starting to reclaim. Strike happenings hold no chance upper mishaps spread even via deep time. They bunch in eras fueled by path rules, birthing peril slots that come back with guessable steadiness. We just dwell in one such slot. If the elders truly logged loops of upper peril, if their figures sharp pinned the designs we're now backing with current starcraft, if their alerts meant to reach via time to societies that would at length hold the tech to grasp them, what loop do we dwell in this instant? And more pressing, stand we readied for what the Sumerians spent 3,000 years trying to alert us of? In 2022, NASA's World Guard Joint Office put out a quiet update to their near-our-globe item, Menace Check. The eye backed what Lone Star Watchers have traced for years. Betwixt 2030 and 2040, our globe's path will haul us via the thickest pack of the torrid shooting star flow met in over 2 ages. The clock matches Sumerian thrusts with jarring sharpness. Their tablets sketched the fiery stone comeback amid an era when manifold upper loops join. The selfsame join current figures show hitting in the next 2 ages. They cautioned of the crimson star cut, and the season the upper grows hot, using prospective phrasing thrusting forward via ages to tag this sharp slot. Their writings hold no bygone sketch. They sketch a repeating menace, one they had eyed pre and figured would come back. The Sumerians held no mere back eye, holding the recall of any elder ruins. They held forward eye, shaping an alert setup shaped to reach via time to whoever would at length take the dome they had scanned with such fervor. They sought to alert us. Every shrine sink, every star figure, every keenly held tablet stood a dispatch sent forward via ages. The dome can turn on you. The peril follows designs, and the designs come back. We stand the society they pen to. The ones dwelling in the age when their tallies would hit close, when the loops would sink anew, when the query would hold no whether the peril lives, but whether we recalled enough to see it nearing. So, as you slide toward rest this night, Somewhere betwixt dream and annals, weigh the elder copyists pressing alerts into soft clay by lamp glow, knowing they would never eye the future they sought to guard, trusting that someone someday would at length grasp what they had spent spans learning to know. If the Sumerians logged the last vast strike pre it hit, do we now dwell in the age they feared would come anew?